Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan. This is a free course based on the book Al-Ajrumiyyah, which is a classical text in Arabic grammar. This book is a great place to start for beginners who have a basic understanding of the language. Before you get started, go to the link in the description and download the companion ebook, which contains translations of the text, in-depth explanations, and exercises. And with that, let's get started. Anwa'ul Kalam, or the types of speech in Arabic. Now, this might be a chapter that you feel like reading through and skipping or not taking so seriously because it might seem like a pointless introduction to the book, but I assure you that is not the case. A lot of these mutun, which are very concise, they are arranged in a very logical manner. Every sentence is put there for a reason, and it is really up to the sharih to bring out this logic and show the intended purpose of the matan. So the Anwa' al-Kalam, the first chapter and the chapters that follow, really lay the groundwork for al-i'rab. There are steps to al-i'rab, and this can be seen as step number 1. And how is this step number 1? I'm going to tell you as we go along, but understand this is a very important concept to understand. This is a very important concept, Anwa'ul Kalam, the types of speech. So let's start with the matan, inshallah. So it says, Al-Kalamu huwa al-lafdhu al-murakkabu al-mufidu bil-wad'i. When you say Al-Kalam in Arabic, what do you mean? Huwa al-lafdhu. It is a spoken utterance, as opposed to something that is written. Al-Kalam is, of course, something that is said. It is something uttered. Al-murakkabu. It is arranged or composed of multiple words, usually. Al-mufidu. It is meaningful and coherent. Bil-wada'i. It follows the wada' or the rules of the Arabic language. So we have 4 things here. Al-lafdu, it is a spoken utterance, that is clear. Al-murakkabu, it has to be of multiple words. But I want to ask you a question here. Can one word be considered as al-kalam in Arabic? And the answer is yes, as long as that one word is enough to convey the intended meaning. For example, if you say kum, means to stand up. You don't need anything else. Your meaning is understood. Kum, ijlis, ta'al. All this is speech, even though it is only one word. So it is not always the case that we need more than one word. Al-mufidu, it has to be meaningful and coherent. If I say ja'a Muhammadun, now this is a meaningful sentence. Ja'a Muhammadun. But if I say Muhammadun waladun baytun al-mustashfa, it doesn't make any sense at all. It is just a bunch of random words jumbled together. And that is not considered as al-kalam in the realm of anyone who is sane. It is not how sane people talk. So that is not a coherent sentence. So by al-kalam, we mean coherent speech. Bil-wada'i, of course, it has to follow the rules of the Arabic language to be Arabic speech. If I say ja'a waladan, doesn't make sense. Of course, it is grammatically wrong. It has to be ja'a waladun. Ja'a waladun. Of course, it is the subject. It is the fa'il. So this is speech in Arabic. وَأَقْسَامُهُ ثَلَاثَةٌ. So now I said there are steps to i'rab, and this is really the first step to figuring out the i'rab of a sentence. To split the speech into, or to break down the speech into these components. So these are the components or the building blocks of speech in Arabic. أقسامه ثلاثة اسم وفعل وحرف جاء لمعنى. So any speech in Arabic, it has to be one of these three things. It has to be a noun, a verb, or a particle. If it is not one of these three things, it is not Arabic. So any word in Arabic, it has to be one of these three things. So why is this the first step of al-i'rab? Why is it important to break down the sentence into nouns and verbs and particles? Let me just show you a simple example. So we have a sentence here. جلس محمد في المسجد. So we have جلس, which is a verb. So it is a past tense verb. It is a فعل ماضي, and therefore it always ends with a fatha. It is مبني على فتحة. So that means you don't have to worry about the i'rab of جلس. If it is فعل ماضي, it's always going to be مبني on the fatha. جلس, ذهب, قرأ. So you don't have to worry about the i'rab of this word. محمد is a noun, so you have to know the i'rab of Muhammad. Fi is again a particle, and all particles are mabni, so we don't have to worry about this word either. Al-masjid is again a noun, and we need to know the i'rab. So by breaking down the sentence, now we have eliminated the parts which are mabni or fixed. So you just have to worry about the words which are mu'arab. And even if the verbs are mu'arab, their rules are much simpler than nouns. So it is extremely beneficial to break down, or to be able to break down the sentence in this manner. So this is why this taqseem is the first step to figuring out the i'rab. Now Ibn Ajrum is going to tell us how to figure out the nouns and verbs and particles. How do you tell them apart? Now you might tell me, Ya Ustad, هذا شيء بسيط. It's very easy. This is a simple matter. We know which ones are the nouns, which ones are the particles, and which ones are the verbs. رجعت, raja is a verb, tu is an attached pronoun, ila is a harf. But if I asked you, what about jalisun? Muhammadun jalisun fil bayt. Muhammadun dhahibun ila al-madrasa. If I tell you, ji'tu qabla qalil, what is the i'rab of qabla? Or what is qabla? So these are questions beginners often find confusing. They're not sure if this is a noun or a verb. So this is where these rules are really going to simplify the matter. You can use these rules as a litmus test to tell nouns, verbs, and particles apart. So what are these rules? This is very simple. You don't need to be intimidated by this. This is a very simple concept. فالاسم يعرف بالخفض والتنوين ودخول الألف واللام. There are three ways you can tell a noun apart. One is the khafdh or the jar. Khafdh means jar. 2, tanween, and 3, the entry of the alif lam. What does this mean? It means that if that word can accept the state of khafdh or jar, then it is a noun. If it can accept the tanween, then it is a noun. And if it can accept the alif lam, then it is a noun. What do we mean by this? Al-bayt, for example. Can it take the state of khafdh? It is already in the state of khafdh in this sentence because of ila. Ilal bayti. Muhammadun. Can it take khafdh? if we make a sentence like أعطيت القلم إلى محمد, I gave the pen to Muhammad. So it can take the khafd. So that means Muhammad is a noun because of this first rule. Because the verbs never take the state of khafd. It is never going to be yadhabi. I'm not talking about the feminine form with the ya, but with just the kasra. It cannot be yadhabi or iktubi. It never takes the state of khafd. And the tanween. Can bayt take tanween? Yes, we can say raja'tu ila baytin. I returned to a house. Raja'tu ila baytin. Muhammadun, we see that it takes the tanween already. Can it take the alif lam? Yes, al-bayt. So if any of these rules are applicable, then we know it is an ism. Only one of these rules need to be true. وحروف الخفض وهي من وإلى وعن وعلى وفي ورب والباء والكاف واللام وحروف القسم. So these are the particles of khafd, the particles of jar, the huruf al-jar. If the noun is preceded by any of these particles, it will be in the state of khafd. Huruf al-qasam, or the particles of taking an oath. So we have al-wawu wal-ba'u wat-ta'. So you can say wallahi, billahi, tallahi. These are all oaths in the name of Allah. So we used to have a lecturer. He used to write on the question paper, I will not cheat in this exam. Wallahi, billahi, tallahi. So you can use the story to remember the particles of the qasam, or the particles of oath. Now we are moving on to the af'al. How do we tell the fi'l apart? وَالْفِعْلُ يُعْرَفُ بِقَدْ وَالسِّينِ وَسَوْفَ وَتَاءِ التَّأْنِيثِ السَّاكِنَةِ. If the particle qad can be used before the verb or the word, then it is a verb. قَدْ أَذْهَبُ إِلَى مَدْرَسَةٍ. Because this particle qad cannot be used in front of a noun. You can't say qad Muhammadun, qad baytun, qad waladun. Doesn't make sense. So if qad can be used in the sentence before the word, then that is a verb. That is the first rule. Then we have the scene of the future tense. سأقرأ الكتاب. سأقرأ الكتاب. Because the scene of the future tense cannot be used for the nouns. There is no sa Muhammadun, sa baytun. Doesn't make sense. Then we have sawfa, which is also for the future tense. Sawfa anamu mubakkiran. So anamu is a verb. Wata it-ta'nis is-sakina is the ta of the feminine gender that can be added to the verbs. So dhahaba becomes dhahabat. So if this ta of the feminine can be added to the verb, then we know it is a verb. If it can be added to the word rather. So these are the rules of the fi'l. This is how you can tell the fi'l apart. Now what about the huruf? والحرف ما لا يصله معه دليل الاسم ولا دليل الفعل. If both of these categories do not apply to the word, then automatically it is a harf. So we know by the principle of exclusion that it is going to be a harf. If it is not a verb or a noun, then naturally it has to be a harf. So I asked you a question in the beginning. جئت قبل قليل. What about قبل? Let's see. Let's apply these rules to قبل. can we add qad qabla? Doesn't make sense grammatically. Seen, sa qabla, sawfa qabla. No. So for sure, it is not a verb. Let's see what were the rules of the noun. Al-Khafdh, Tanween, and Alif Lam. Can we say al-qablu? No, we cannot say al-qablu. We cannot say, can we say qablin? No, this is not correct. But does it take the khafd or the state of jar? We can say min qabli. Min qabli. So we know as it takes the state of jar, then it has to be an ism. Qabla has to be an ism because it accepts the different states of i'rab like jar, nasab, and so on. So it is not a particle. So these are the rules which help you determine the three categories of Arabic speech, namely nouns, verbs, and particles. Lesson number 2 is Al-I'rab. So what is Al-I'rab? The Ajrumiyyah, we said, is all about Al-I'rab. So what exactly do we mean when we say Al-I'rab? هو تغيير أواخر الكلمة لاختلاف العوامل الداخلة عليها لفظا أو تقديرا وأقسامه 4: رفع ونصب وخفض وجزم. So we're going to explain this inshallah. تغيير أواخر الكلم, that's all i'rab is, the changing of the ends of the words. Let's open up the notepad here. So al-i'rab, it has 4 states: raf'un wa nasbun wa khafd and jazm. What is khafd? It is jar. Jar is also known as khafd. So in the Ajrumiyyah, jar is referred to as khafd. It is the same thing. So let's take a simple sentence. ذهب محمد إلى البيت. This is as simple as it gets. Now, the word endings. What haraka do you put at the ending of each word? That is what al-i'rab is. ذهب. We know it is فعل ماضي. So it has to be ذهب. Ends with the fatha because فعل ماضي is مبني على فتحة. محمد has to end with رفع because محمد here is the subject. It is the فاعل محمد. إلى is a حرف. So it is مبني, it is fixed. إلى البيت ends with the كسرة. Why? Because of the awamil الداخلة. The إلى here is an amil. It is an amil. Amil is something that acts upon the word, that influences the word coming after it. So إلى here being the harf jar causes bayt to take the state of jar or khafd. So this is what i'rab really is, just figuring out the ends of the words. And so as we progress along through the lessons, we are going to learn these rules and the reasoning and the grammar behind the haraka that we're going to put at the ends of the words, or in other words, the i'rab of the words. وأقسامه أربعة. We saw the states of الإعراب: رفع ونسب وخفض وجزم. فللأسماء من ذلك الرفع والنسب والخفض ولا جزم فيها. This is an important rule. The nouns, they take these three states of i'rab: the rafa, nasab, and khafd. They never take the jazm. The noun never accepts the state of jazm. Muhammad never ends with the sukoon. We read it with the sukoon. If you want to stop at the word Muhammad, we can stop with the sukoon, but there is always a haraka at the end of the word, because the noun will not take the state of jazm. وَلِلْأَفْعَالِ مِنْ ذَلِكَ الرَّفْعُ وَالنَّسْبُ وَالْجَزْمُ وَلَا خَفْضَ فِيهَا. As for verbs, they take the state of rafa, nasab, and jazm. They never take the state of khafd. They never take the state of jar. So if you remember in the first chapter, one of the ways to tell nouns from verbs is by the state of jar. If it can take the state of jar, then we know it is a noun and not a verb, because the verb never accepts the state of jar. So this is a very simple introduction to the concept of al-i'rab. Now we're going to come to an important lesson concerning i'rab. We said there are steps to figuring out the i'rab of the sentence. Now, do you remember the first step we talked about? It is to divide the sentence, or to break it down into nouns, verbs, and particles. That is the first step. Now, the second step is to split them into mabni and mu'rab. So what is mabni and mu'rab? There are some words in the sentence that are always fixed, or they are unaffected by their position in the sentence, or by the awamil, or the governing agents acting upon the word. No matter what happens to the word, it never changes. These words are called mabni, or fixed words. And the words that take the i'rab, or undergo changes according to their position in the sentence or their role in the sentence, these are called mu'rab. So why do we need to do this classification? Because it simplifies the process even further. So if you look at this sentence, for example, we have khalaqa. Now khalaqa is shown here that it is mabni. Why is it mabni? Because it is fi'l madi. And the fi'l madi, it is always mabni on the fatha. So if you get a fi'l madi, you don't need to worry about the i'rab. It is always going to be khalaqa, jalasa, qara'a, dhahaba, qama. So you get the idea. It's always going to end with the fatha if it's by itself. So we have taken this word out. Al-insan, it is mu'rab. And what is its role in the sentence? It is maf'ul bihi, because khalaqal insana. So it is maf'ul bihi, and therefore it is mansub. Min, again, it is a particle, and again it is mabni. The particles are always fixed, so you don't need to worry about its i'rab. Alaq, you need to know the i'rab. It is going to be in the state of jar because of the harf min. So this is the second step of i'rab. Now is the important question: how do you know if a word is mabni or mu'arab? Now this is a good question that you need to think about. How do you figure out if the word is mabni or mu'arab? But alhamdulillah, the words that are mabni are limited categories which can be memorized. So I'm going to show you an infographic which will bi'idhnillah simplify the process. If you memorize this infographic, inshallah you can master the words that are mabni, or all the categories of words that are mabni, so you can recognize them in the sentence and take them out. So this is the khatt of i'rab, or the line of i'rab. On the right side we have mabni. Everything on the right is mabni and everything on the left is mu'arab. So let us look at mabni. All past tense verbs, al-af'al al-madiyah, al-af'al al-madiyah. All the past tense verbs, they are mabni. So we gave the examples for past tense verbs. They're all going to end with the fatha. Al-af'al al-amr, the command tense words. The fi'l amr or the af'al al-amr, they are always going to be in the form of mabni. طيب. Then we have the huruf. All the huruf are going to be fixed. So like min, ala, an, all of those things, they're going to be fixed. They're all mabni. طيب. And we have fi'l mudari. Fi'l mudari, it has some i'rab. Not all fi'l mudari are mabni, but in these two cases they are mabni. The fi'l mudari, if it is attached with the noon and niswa. What is noon and niswa? It is this form, yaktubna. So if you change the word into the feminine plural form in the third person, yaktubna, yajlisna, yakra'ana, yadhabna, then it always ends with the sukun, yadhabna. So it becomes mabni on the sukun. The same thing if it is attached to the noon at-tawkid. لأقولن, لأجلسن, سيذهبن. So if you attach this noon to the verb, it becomes mabni with the fatha. يذهبن, يذهبن. So it always ends with the fatha. So in this way, the fi'l mudari becomes fixed. طيب. So this infographic needs some corrections here. I'm going to make them and upload it to the module, inshallah, so you can download it. طيب. What about the nouns? These are the particles and verbs. What about the nouns? Most of the nouns, or all the nouns, are mu'arab. All the nouns are mu'arab except for these limited categories. Except for the things shown here, all the other nouns are mu'arab. So what are the mabni nouns? First we have the dama'ir. We have the dama'ir. Hum, huma, huwa, hiya. All of these dama'ir, they are mabni, because it's always going to be hum. It's not going to be in the state of nasab or rafa or jar or anything like that. It's always going to be mabni. It has no i'rab. It is mabni. The attached pronouns, even if it comes in the form of the attached pronoun, the same thing. It is going to be mabni. استقبلنا قابلت الذي حصل على الجائزة. They are مبني. طيب. Then we have أسماء الإشارة وهي الذي هذا هذه هؤلاء ذلك ذاك تلك أولئك. All of these things, they are مبني. You never have to worry about their i'rab. We have الأسماء الموصولة. What are the أسماء الموصولة? الذي الذين اللاتي اللائي اللواتي. So if someone comes and tries to ask you what is the i'rab of الذي, then you can say the أسماء الموصولة, they are مبني. طيب. Then we have أسماء الاستفهام, the question words كيف متى أين من, all of those. أسماء الشرط. What are the أسماء الشرط? إذا متى أيان من للعاقل for living things. ما مهما أين حيثما أن أينما كيفما. So these are all things that occur in the sentence as shart. So these kinds of things, question words, particles, they're not particles but nouns which are used to stipulate conditions. So all these things are mabni except for ay. Ay is not mabni because ay can change its i'rab. Can be ayyu and ayyi and so on. And some of the dhuruf. Some of the dhuruf like haythu, mundu, ams, al-an. Not all of them. Because qabla, for example, can have i'rab. طيب. الأعداد المركبة. The numbers from 11 to 19 except for 12, because 12 can have i'rab. Nouns that carry meanings of verbs or actions. The asma'ul af'al. These are some special verbs like amin, hayhata, uffin. Like when you say uffin, like these are nouns, but they have the meanings of actions. These nouns are special nouns called asma'ul af'al, and these are mabni, like the word amin. We don't say amun to make it rafa. We always say amin. So it is going to be mabni. طيب. Now mu'rab, it's very easy to understand because everything other than the things we have discussed here is going to be mu'rab. So we have fi'al mudari, all the verbs in the present tense, they are mu'rab, and all the asma that are not mentioned here, they are going to be mu'rab. And we are going to learn the i'rab of verbs and the i'rab of all the nouns in the coming chapters, inshallah. Alamatul i'rab, or the indicators of the i'rab. These are the signs which show us the state of i'rab of a word. Now Ibn Ajrum, he uses a slightly complicated methodology to explain the alamat. He mentions each case like rafa, nasab, khafdh, and then he talks about each alama or each sign individually. And I feel this methodology is a bit complicated and difficult to understand. But some ulama, they have explained this
concept in a much simpler way. What we will do is look at the cases in which the sign of i'rab is other than the default sign. What are the default signs of i'rab? They are dhamma for rafa, fatha for nasab, and kisra for khafdh, and finally the sukun for jazm. These are the default indicators of the i'rab. But there are about 7 cases in which the i'rab is indicated by other than the default indicator. So by simply understanding these exceptional cases, you can master this entire concept. The first exceptional case is the muthanna or the dual form. In the dual form, the state of rafa is indicated by the alif, and the state of nasab by the ya, and the state of khafdh again by ya. It does not have the state of jazm as it is a noun. جاء الطالبان إلى المدرسة. So the word taliban, here it is in the state of rafa. How do we know it is in the state of rafa? By this alif, at-taliban. If it is in the state of nasab, it is going to be talibaini. So the ya here in the middle, it indicates the state of nasab. حتى أبلغ مجمع البحرين. Again, for the state of khafdh, it is going to be the ya again. Then we have جمع المذكر السالم, or the sound masculine plural. For this, the state of rafa is denoted by the waw, and the nasab by ya, and the state of khafdh by ya. وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ. Here the waw indicates the i'rab. The waw is the indicator of the i'rab. وَكَذَلِكَ نُنْجِي الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Here it is in the state of nasab, so it uses the ya. مَرَرْتُ بِالْمُسْلِمِينَ. Again, the state of khafdh by ya. Then we have جمع المؤنث السالم, or the sound feminine plural. For the sound feminine plural, the rafa is indicated by the dhamma, the nasab by kisra, and the khafdh again by kisra. إذا جاءك المؤمنات. Here the dhamma indicates the i'rab. خلق الله السماوات, the state of nasab. وكل المؤمنات يغضضن من أبصارهن, the state of khafdh by kisra. So the state of nasab, instead of taking the fatha, it takes the kisra. Then we have the asma al-khamsa. These are the 5 nouns, which are abuka, akhuka, hamuka, fuka, dhu ilm. For these special nouns, the state of rafa is indicated by waw, the state of nasab by alif, and the state of khafdh by ya. So when akhuka is in the state of nasab, for example, it becomes akhaka. The waw is replaced by the alif. When it is in the state of khafdh, it becomes akhika. Abu Fahadin sahibu walidi. So Abu Fahad, here it is in the state of rafa, indicated by the waw. Ra'aytu abaka. It is in the state of nasab, indicated by the alif. And finally, Ra'aytu sadiqa abika. It is in the state of khafdh, indicated by the ya. Then we have mamnu min as-sarf. In mamnu min as-sarf, the state of rafa is indicated by the dhamma, the state of nasab by fatha, and the state of khafdh by the fatha. Mamnu min as-sarf, they don't take the kasra, and they don't take the tanween. Raja Ahmadu ila bayti. Ahmad is mamnu min as-sarf. And the nominal state, or the state of rafa, is indicated by the dhamma. Ra'aytu Ahmada fi al-maktaba, the state of nasab. Sallamtu ala Ahmada sabahan. So instead of kisra, the word Ahmad takes the fatha. Al-mudari' al-mu'tal al-akhir. These are the present tense verbs which end with the huruf of illa. For these, the state of rafa is shown by the dhamma, the state of nasab by the fatha, and the state of jazm by hiding the harf of illa. So how does this work? Examples for these are yakhsha, yad'u, yaqdi. Lam yakhsha illa Allah. So here the word is in the state of jazm because of the particle of jazm, which is lam. So we simply remove the letter of illa, which is the alif maksura here. So it simply becomes yakhsha instead of yakhsha. Muhammadun yahdi ila al-haq. Here yahdi is in the state of rafa, but we don't pronounce the ending dhamma because of the difficulty. So in words like yahdi, qadi, and so on, we don't pronounce the last haraka because of al-thaqal or the difficulty in pronouncing it. It is a bit difficult to say yahdiyu, qadiyu. Finally, we have the af'al al-khamsa, the 5 special nouns. These are nouns which generally end with the waw and the noon, like ta'kulun, tasumun, tadhabun, yajlisun, and so on. For these, the state of rafa is indicated by the final noon, the state of nasab by removing the noon, and finally the state of jazm by removing the noon again. Antum ta'kulun, state of rafa. Wa an tasumu khayrun lakum. Here the final noon is removed because of the particle of nasab, and it is replaced with the alif. Lan ta'kulu, again the state of jazm is shown by removing the noon and replacing it with the alif.
Part 4 deals with the i'rab of verbs, and the i'rab of verbs is fairly straightforward, inshallah. Ibn Ajrum says, Al-af'alu thalathatun. The verb has 3 forms: madin wa mudari'un wa amrun. Nahwa daraba wa yadribu wadrib. So in the verbs, we have the past tense, the present tense, and then we have the imperative or the command tense. And the examples for these are daraba wa yadribu and wadrib. فالماضي مفتوح الآخر أبدا والأمر مجزوم أبدا. And the past tense verbs, as far as the i'rab is concerned, are very simple because they are mabni. Their endings are fixed. They always end with the fatha. مفتوح الآخر أبدا. So ضرب, jalasa, qama, ذهب. All of these end with the fatha. والأمر مجزوم أبدا. As for the command tense or the imperative, it always ends with the sukun. Now there are exceptions for these rules, but we will worry about them later. But this is true in the general case. The fi'al al-madi ends with the fatha, and the fi'al al-amr ends with the sukun, or it is in the state of jazm. وَالْمُضَارِعُ مَا كَانَ في أوله إحدى الزوائد الأربع التي يجمعها قولك أنيت. As for the present tense, it is what starts with one of these letters. And here Ibn Ajrum is simply talking about the cases of the verb or the forms of the verb, like adhabu, nadhabu, yadhabu, tadhabu, and so on. وَهُوَ مَرْفُوعٌ أَبَدًا. And this is the i'rab of the verb. It is always in the state of rafa. The fi'al al-mudari', the present tense verb, is always in the state of rafa,
unless حتى يدخل عليه ناصب أو جازم, unless a particle of nasb or a particle of jazm enters upon it. Here you can see in this diagram what we talked about. The fi'al al-madi mabni al-fatha, it is fixed with the fatha at the end. Fi'al al-amr mabni al-sukun, it is fixed with the sukun at the end. And finally the fi'al al-mudari, it is mu'arab, it has changing word endings. And we just mentioned the rules for the mudari. Now let's look at the nawasib and the jawazim, the particles of nasab and the particles of jazm. فالنواسب عشرة. The particles of nasab are 10. وهي أن ولن وإذن وكي ولام كي ولام الجهود وحتى والجواب بالفاء والواو وأو. والجوازم 18 وهي لم لما علم ألم ولام الأمر والدعاء ولا في النهي والدعاء وإن وما ومن ومهما وإذما وأي ومتى وأيان وأين وأن وحيثما وكيفما وإذا في الشعر خاصة. So these are the nawasib and the jawazim. And let's look at them in more detail along with some examples. So first we have the jawazim. لم يكن الذين كفروا من أهل الكتاب. An ayah from the Quran. Now an important question is, we see that the verb yakun here taking the kasrah, and we said in the previous chapters that the verb never accepts the state of jar. So why does it have a kasrah? Actually, this verb has the state of jazm because it is preceded by a particle of jazm. It is actually lam yakun. But according to the rules of Arabic, when two sukoons come together, the word after it starts with a sukoon here. So lam yakun and another sukoon. So how do we read it? If two sukoons come together, we have to make some changes in order to read it. And in this situation, what we do is we give it a kasrah. So it becomes لم يكن الذين كفروا من أهل الكتاب. And the same is true for the next example. لما ولما يدخل الإيمان في قلوبكم. So I've written it without the changed haraka. So you can see. So we have sukun here, but if you open this ayah in the Mus'haf, you'll find the kasrah here. وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلِ الْإِيمَانُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. So that is how the ayah is read. But actually, this verb has the sukun on it because it is preceded by a particle of jazm. Then we have lamul amr. لِيُنْفِقْ ذُو سَعَةٍ مِنْ سَعَتِهِ. Lamul amr here, it is used to issue a command or an instruction. La fi nahi wa du'a, the la of negation or request. La taqrabu salata wa antum sukara. So if you're issuing a request or if you are prohibiting something, this la is a particle of jazm. The word after la, it takes the verb after la, it takes the state of jazm. أدوات الشرط الجازمة. فأي الفريقين أحق بالأمن إن كنتم تعلمون. The conditional particles which give the state of jazm. These are ayyu, in, wama, and men. So these particles, all of them
they give the state of jazm. فأي الفريقين أحق بالأمن إن كنتم تعلمون. إن يكن غنيا أو فقيرا فالله أولى بهما وما تفعلوا من خير يعلمه الله فمن يعمل مثقال ذرة خيرا يره. So these are the examples for the jawazim. Now let's look at the nawasib, or the particles which give the state of nasb. These are an, يمنون عليك أن أسلموا, لن فلن يغفر الله لهم, إذن قال رجل سأزورك غدا فأجاب الآخر إذن أكرمك. So the particle إذن gives the verb the state of nasb. إذن can be written like this or with the nun. كي فرددناه إلى أمه كي تقر عينها. لام كي لماذا جئت لأقرأ. This is the lam which is used to answer the question why, or to give the reason. حتى تأتيهم البينة. الجواب بالفاء. أسلم فتدخل الجنة. This is the fa which comes after a condition. Aslim, accept Islam, and thus enter Jannah. ولا تطغوا فيه فيحل عليكم غضبي. الجواب بالواو. The same like the fa, but with the waw. The waw which comes after a condition. اجتهد وتنجح. Work hard and thus succeed. جالس العلماء وتستفيد منهم. Sit with the ulama and thus benefit from them. أو لألزمنك أو تقضيني ديني. Note that the أو here is not the normal أو, which usually means or. Here it means إلى. لألزمنك أو تقضيني ديني. Here it means لألزمنك إلى أن تقضيني ديني. So this is a special usage. I will accompany you until you pay my loan or my debt. So these are the particles of nasab. So these are the two things that can change the i'rab of the verb. In all other cases, the i'rab of the verb is that it is in the state of rafa. The final part is about the nouns. And this is where we find the bulk of the grammar rules in the Arabic language. Most of the i'rab has to do with nouns. Now, Ibn Ajrum, he has a very straightforward and simple methodology to explain the i'rab of nouns in the Arabic language. What he does is that he classifies the nouns into nouns which always take the state of rafa, nouns which take the state of nasab, and nouns which take the state of khafdh. So we are going to look at all the nouns which always take the state of rafa first, then we'll move on to nasab, and finally khafdh. And when we're done, inshallah, we're going to know the i'rab of all these types of nouns. The first part is the nouns in rafa. So Ibn Ajrum says, al-marfu'atu sab'ah. The nouns which take the state of rafa are 7 categories or 7 types. What are these types of nouns which are always in the state of rafa? هي الفاعل والمفعول الذي لم يسمى فاعله والمبتدأ وخبره واسم كان وأخواتها وخبر إن وأخواتها والتابع للمرفوع وهو 4 أشياء النعت والعطف والتوكيد والبدل. So what he's talking about is all the kinds of nouns which we have listed out here. The first one is the fa'il, which is the verbal subject. And inshallah, we're going to go through each and every one of these and try to understand them better.
The second one is na'ib fa'il, which is the object whose subject is not mentioned. The mubtada, which is the nominal subject. Khabarul mubtada is the predicate. Ismu kana wa akhwatiha, kana and the sisters. Khabaru inna wa akhwatiha, the predicate of inna and its sisters. Why doesn't he mention the khabar of kana here? Because the khabar of kana comes under mansubat, because it always takes the state of nasab and not the state of rafa. And similarly, the ism of inna takes nasab. So it is not mentioned here, but the khabar of inna takes the state of rafa. So it is one of the marfu'at. And finally, we have the tabi' lil marfu'. What is meant by the tabi' lil marfu'? These are nouns which are marfu' because they are following another noun which is also marfu'. This is the tabi', something that follows. So what are these marfu'at which are following other nouns? These are 4 types. An-na'tu, which is the adjective. Al-atfu, which is the conjunction. At-tawkid, which is corroboration. And finally, we have the badal, which is substitution. So if the na'at is attached to another noun which is in the state of rafa, it is also going to be in rafa. But if it was in nasab, the na'at will also be in nasab. And if it's khafdh, it's going to be in khafdh. So this is common to all these elements which are just in the state of rafa when they are linked to something in the state of rafa. And when we go through these individually, inshallah, we're going to understand this better. The verbal subject or the fa'il. What is the fa'il? Ibn Ajrum says, Al-fa'ilu huwa al-ismu al-marfu' al-madhkuru qablahu fi'lu. It is a noun which is in the state of rafa. It is marfu'. Al-madhkuru qablahu fi'luhu. Its verb is always before it, or the verb comes before this fa'il. So let's look at some of these examples. Now, basically in Arabic, there are 2 types of sentences. There is the verbal sentence, which is just any sentence that begins with a verb. Whereas the nominal sentence, which is the second type, is the sentence which begins with a noun. We can have the sentence in 2 ways. Qama Muhammadun. Muhammad stood up. So it begins with the verb here. So this is a verbal sentence. We can also say Muhammadun qama, where the sentence begins with a noun and therefore it is a nominal sentence. So the fa'il is the subject of a verbal sentence. That's what Ibn Ajrum says here. Al-madhkuru qablahu fi'luhu. The verb comes before the subject, as it is a verbal sentence. Now let's look at some examples. ذهب محمد إلى البيت. Muhammad went to the house. It begins with a verb. So Muhammad is the fa'il. Muhammad is the subject. جاء الوالد بعد السفر. قرأ الطالب الدرس. All these are verbal subjects because the sentence starts with the verb. But if the sentence started with a noun, then it is not the fa'il. Muhammadun dhahaba ila al-masjid. The verb does not come before the subject, but it comes after the subject. So in this case, Muhammad is not fa'il, but it is rather the mubtada, which we will learn insha'Allah in the following section. At-talibu qara'a kitabahu. At-talibu qara'a kitabahu. Here also the sentence starts with a noun, so it is not a verbal sentence. So this is something very simple. If the sentence starts with a verb, then the subject of that sentence is known as the fa'il. And the fa'il is always in the state of rafa. Now Ibn Ajrum says, وَهُوَ عَلَى قِسْمَيْنِ ظَاهِرٍ وَمُضْمِرٍ.
The verbal sentence is divided into two types: the dhahir, the apparent subject, and the mudmar. The mudmar is when it happens in the form of a dhamir, which we will look at right now, inshallah. So he says, فَالظَّاهِرُ نَحْوَ قَوْلِكَ قَامَ زَيْدٌ وَيَقُومُ زَيْدٌ وَقَامَ الزَّيْدَانِ. The subject is apparent when we can see it directly in the sentence. قَامَ زَيْدٌ. All of these are examples for subjects which are apparent. Here, Zayd is a subject and he is mentioned explicitly. All these are further examples. وَقَامَ الرِّجَالُ وَيَقُومُ الرِّجَالُ وَقَامَتْ هِنْدُ. Whenever the subject is mentioned explicitly, it is dhahir. So what is meant by mudmar? The mudmar, or the subject which comes in the form of a pronoun, is exactly what its name says. When a pronoun takes the place of the subject, when the subject is represented by a pronoun instead of being shown explicitly, then it is mudmar. What are examples of these? Ibn Ajrum gives us plenty of examples. Darabtu. In this sentence, where is the subject? Daraba. If you look at the i'rab of this word, daraba, it is fi'al madhi, a past tense verb, and it is mabni ala as-sukun because it is attached to a pronoun. But the subject is the ta here, which indicates the first person. So darabtu means I hit. So the fa'il is a pronoun here. So it is mudmar. وَضَرَبْنَا وَضَرَبْتَ وَضَرَبْتِ. All these are examples for the fa'il, which is mudmar. The na'ib fa'il, or the object whose subject is not mentioned. Say you want to mention that an action took place or something was done, but you don't want to say who did it. In English, we have passive voice for this. For example, you want to say the apple was eaten. So here you're not mentioning who ate it, or in other words, you're not mentioning the subject. This is passive voice in English. So we have the same in Arabic, and that is what we call na'ib fa'il. Ibn Ajrum says, وَهُوَ الْإِسْمُ الْمَرْفُوعُ الَّذِي لَمْ يُذْكَرْ مَعَهُ فَاعِلُهُ. It is a nominal noun, or a noun in the state of rafa, الَّذِي لَمْ يُذْكَرْ مَعَهُ فَاعِلُهُ, along with which the fa'il or the subject is not mentioned. So how do we do this in Arabic? We take the verb of the normal sentence and we change it to make the sentence into passive. And instead of the subject, the word after it becomes na'ib fa'il. So Ibn Ajrum explains how to do this exactly. He says, فَإِنْ كَانَ الْفِعْلُ مَاضِيًا ضُمَّ أَوَّلُهُ وَكُسِرَ مَا قَبْلَ آخِرِهِ. If it is in the past tense, if the verb is in the past tense, we give dhamma to the first letter, and then we take the penultimate letter or the letter before the last, and we give it a kasrah. This is in the case of ماضي, or the past tense. وَإِنْ كَانَ مُضَارِعًا ضُمَّ أَوَّلُهُ وَفُتِحَ مَا قَبْلَ آخِرِهِ. If it is a present tense verb, we give dhamma to the first letter and we give fatha to the penultimate letter. Now let us look at this in action. Here we have a normal sentence. أكل الولد التفاحة. So we have the verb and then we have the fa'il, because this is the subject which comes after the verb. So as we just learned in the previous chapter, this is the fa'il and it is marfu'. And then we have tufah, which is the object. And the object we are going to learn under the mansubat, because it is always in the state of nasb. So this is a normal sentence which has the subject mentioned. If you want to change this into passive voice, we are going to change this verb. So according to what Ibn Ajrum says, we're going to give dhamma to the first letter and the penultimate letter, the kaf, will get a kasra instead of this fatha. So akala becomes ukila, and we are going to hide the subject, and then the na'ib fa'il, the tuffah in this case, takes the state of rafa. So instead of nasab, it is going to take rafa. So the sentence becomes ukilat tuffahu. So this is the verb which is mabni ala majhul, which is changed to denote passive voice. And tuffah is the na'ib fa'il which is in the state of rafa. Now let us look at some more examples to make this clearer. In the right column, we have passive voice or sentences using na'ib fa'il, whereas on the left we have the same sentence in regular voice, in active voice. Duriba Zaydun. Zayd was hit. Here we don't mention who hit Zayd. In a normal sentence, in active voice, it will be Daraba Ahmadu Zaydan. Ahmad hit Zayd. Yukramu al-dayf. The guest was taken care of. Al-Karimu yukrimu dayfahu. Here the subject is mentioned. Quri al-Quran. Here as it is mudari for yukramu, as it is mudari, we take the normal present tense verb yukrimu and we keep the dhamma on the first letter, and for the penultimate letter, according to Ibn Ajrum, we have to give it the fatha if it is mudari. So yukrimu becomes yukramu. Quri'a is in the past tense. Now this is a slightly different case. If it is ajaba, we have the alif, which is one of the letters of illa in the verb. Then we are going to change it to ya instead of giving it a kasra. The whole letter is changed. Ajaba al-muallim as-su'al becomes ujiba as-su'al. Yasuqu Zaydun as-sayyarata sari'an. Here again we have one of the letters of illa, which is the waw, which is supposed to be changed. So instead of just changing the haraka on it, we are going to change the entire letter, and it becomes tusaqu. Tusaqu sayyaratu sari'an. So if this seems a bit confusing, I am linking an article which clearly explains how to build the passive voice. So this is actually sarf, and you don't have to worry about it too much, inshallah. I will put a link in the description which inshallah explains this process a little bit, how to change the active voice into the passive voice. And the rules differ slightly according to the type of verb. If it is a verb of illa, which has a letter of illa, then as we saw, the rules are slightly different. وَهُوَ عَلَى قِسْمَيْنِ ظَاهِرٍ وَمُضْمَرٍ. Now this classification should sound familiar to you because we just did the same classification for the fa'il, and it is the classification to apparent and implicit, explicit and implicit. Dhahir is explicit, where the element is mentioned clearly, and mudmar is implicit, where it comes in the form of a pronoun. So how do we do this classification for na'ib fa'il? The examples of the explicit na'ib fa'il are as follows. Duriba Zaydun, wa yudrabu Zaydun, ukrima Amrun. In all these examples, the na'ib fa'il is clearly mentioned. It is Zayd, it is Zayd again, here it is Amr, yukramu Amrun, Amr again. So if the na'ib fa'il is clearly mentioned, then it is dhahir. What is meant by mudmar? Mudmar is when the na'ib fa'il takes the form of a pronoun. So it is duribtu wa duribna
وضربت. All these 12 forms Ibn Ajrum mentions. So in the section of the fa'il, it was ضربت وضربنا وضربت. Here we change the verb into passive voice. So it is ضربت وضربنا وضربت وضربتِ and so on. And here's an example from the Quran. In the first ayah, Allah says, وَلَقَدْ خَلَقَنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ سُلَالَةٍ مِنْ طِينٍ. Here the subject is mentioned. So Allah Azza wa Jal is referring to Himself. He said, we created. As for the second example, it is وَخُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. Man was created in a state of weakness. So here the subject is not mentioned. So this is a sentence in the passive voice, and insan, instead of being a regular object, like in the first instance, which takes the state of nasab, here insan is na'ib fa'il, which takes the state of rafa. Now let's look at the Mubtada and the Khabar. The Mubtada and the Khabar is really simple. What is the Mubtada? المبتدأ هو الاسم المرفوع العاري من العوامل اللفظية. It is a marfu' noun. It is always in the state of rafa. العاري من العوامل اللفظية. It is free of any particles acting upon it. This basically means that the Mubtada comes at the beginning of the sentence and there is no element influencing the Mubtada, like the particle of inna before it. If the particle of inna or kana or dhanna comes before the Mubtada, then the noun is not a Mubtada, but it becomes the ism of inna or the ism of kana, the ism of dhanna, and so on. But if there's nothing before the Mubtada and it is free, so to say, from any influencing element, then that noun is a Mubtada. وَالْخَبَرُ وَالْإِسْمُ الْمَرْفُوعُ الْمُسْنَدُ إِلَيْهِ. And the Khabar is simply another noun in the state of Rafa, which is attached to it, attached to the Mubtada. So it is the predicate. نحو قولك زيد قائم. An example of this is زيد قائم. وَالزَّيْدَانِ قَائِمَانِ وَالزَّيْدُونَ قَائِمُونَ. All of these are examples of the Mubtada and the Khabar. Here, which is the Mubtada? Zaydun is the Mubtada. It comes at the beginning of the sentence and there is nothing acting upon it. There is no particle of inna or kana or dhanna, and there is no verb before it. So Zaydun is definitely a Mubtada. And Qa'imun is the predicate of this Mubtada, and it can be singular, dual or plural, as you can see in the examples. So keep in mind that nothing can come in front of the Mubtada. وَالْمُبْتَدَعُ قِسْمَانِ ظَاهِرٌ وَمُضْمَرٌ. And this is the classification we are very familiar with by now, because we've been using this classification for all the previous elements that we have learned. The ظاهر is the apparent explicit Mubtada. فَظَاهِرُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ ذِكْرُهُ. And ظاهر is what we have already seen. So all these examples we have already gone through. These are all examples of the Mubtada which is explicit, because we can see the Mubtada explicitly and directly mentioned here. زَيْدٌ قَائِمٌ وَالزَّيْدَانِ قَائِمَانِ وَالزَّيْدُونَ قَائِمُونَ. Now if the Mubtada is in the form of a dhamir or a pronoun, then it is an implicit Mubtada. And what are the pronouns that we can use as the Mubtada? We have them here. أنا ونحن وأنت وأنتِ وأنتما and so on. So all of these can be the Mubtada, and if they are used, then it is mudmar. It is an implicit Mubtada. So if you say أنتم قائمون, what is the Mubtada here? The pronoun أنتم is the Mubtada. هو قائم. هو is the Mubtada. والخبر قسمان مفرد وغير مفرد. The khabar is also divided into two types. The first one is the mufrad. What is meant by mufrad here? It does not mean singular, but it means a single word. So all the examples we've been looking at are examples of the khabar, which is mufrad. And the second type is the ghayru mufrad, the non-singular, or the mubtada, which comes in the form of multiple words or in the form of a sentence. وغير المفرد أربعة أشياء. The mubtada, which is not a single word, which is غير مفرد, can come in 7 forms. They are الجار والمجرور والظرف والفعل مع فاعله والمبتدأ مع خبره. What does this mean? When you look at the examples, this will become clear inshallah. So for the first example, the khabar, which comes in the form of the jar and majroor. Let us look at this example. Zaydun fi dar. Zayd is in the house. So Zaydun is the mubtada, that is clear. But where is the khabar? In this case, the khabar is made up of this combination of words, or the shibh jumla. So we have the jar and the majroor. So this together makes the khabar of this sentence. Same way we can have a dharf or an adverbial expression as the khabar. Zaydun indaka. Indaka, the entire combination is the khabar. Then we have a verb and its subject. So if you say Zaydun qama abuhu, it's a perfectly correct sentence, but what is the khabar here? Zaydun is the mubtada, and the khabar is made up of both of these words, qama abuhu. Zaydun ukila ta'amahu. So ukila is the example for na'ib fa'il here. So Zaydun ukila ta'amuhu, ukila ta'amuhu is the khabar. Then we have al-mubtada ma'a khabarihi. So the khabar can be made up of the mubtada and khabar. So this sentence will have a second mubtada. So the first mubtada is Zaydun. And when you say Zaydun, baytuhu ba'id. Bayt is again a mubtada, and ba'id is its khabar. So Zaydun is the first mubtada, and the predicate is made up of both these words, the mubtada and the khabar again. Muhammadun khattuhu Hassan. It is the same. Khattuhu is the mubtada and Hassan is the predicate. And together they form the khabar of the sentence. باب العوامل الداخلة على المبتدأ والخبر. These are the agents that are applied to the subject and the predicate. There are certain elements that come before the mubtada and the khabar, which have an influence on the i'rab of the same. So what are these things? Ibn Ajrum says, وَهِيَ ثَلَاثَةُ أَشْيَاء. These are 3 things. كَانَ وَأَخْوَاتُهَا. Kana and its sisters. That is the first. وَإِنَّ وَأَخْوَاتُهَا. Then comes inna and the sisters. And finally, وَظَنَنْتُ وَأَخْوَاتُهَا. So these 3 things are the agents which have an effect on the mubtada and the khabar. And it will become very clear inshallah when we look at the respective examples. فَأَمَّا كَانَ وَأَخْوَاتُهَا فَإِنَّهَا تَرْفَعُ الْإِسْمَ وَتَنْسِبُ الْخَبَرِ. As for kana and its sisters, what is their effect on the mubtada and the khabar? The mubtada becomes the ism of kana, and the khabar becomes the khabar of kana. The effect that kana has is that it gives the state of rafa to the ism. The mubtada is known as the ism here when kana occurs in the sentence. فإنها ترفع الاسم. So it gives rafa, the state of rafa, to the ism. وتنسب الخبر. And it gives the state of nasab to the khabar. So this is the effect of kana and all its sisters. وهي, what are the sisters of kana? وهي كان وأمسى وأسبح وأضحى وظل وبات وسار وليس وما زال وما انفك وما فتي وما برح وما دام. So all of these are the sisters of kana, and each of these words mean different things.
But why are they known as the sisters of kana? Because they have the same effect on the i'rab of the mubtada and the khabar. So all these words which follow kana in its effect are known as the sisters of kana. Ibn Ajrum further says, وَمَا تَصَرَّفَ مِنْهَا نَهْوَ كَانَ وَيَكُونُ وَكُنْ. The sisters of kana can occur in any of the three tenses of the verb in Arabic. It can be perfect, it can be imperfect, it can be in the imperative form. كَانَ وَيَكُونُ وَكُنْ. So all these have the same effect. وَأَسْبَحَ وَيُسْبِحُ وَأَسْبِحْ تَقُولُ كَانَ زَيْدٌ قَائِمًا. So this is the first example. كَانَ, the particle. زَيْدٌ is the ism of kana here. So it gives the state of rafa to this ism. قَائِمًا, because it is the khabar of kana. So it takes the state of nasb. So you can't say كَانَ زَيْدٌ قَائِمٌ. That would be a mistake because the khabar of kana has to take the state of nasb. It is mansub. So كَانَ زَيْدٌ قَائِمًا. And it is the same for laysa because it is one of the sisters of kana. So it becomes وَلَيْسَ عَمْرٌ شَاخِصًا وَمَا أَشْبَهَ ذَلِكَ, and so on. وَأَمَّا إِنَّ وَأَخْوَاتُهَا. Now we come to inna and its sisters. What is the effect that inna has? فَإِنَّهَا تَنْصِبُ الْإِسْمَ وَتَرْفَعُ الْخَبَرِ. It is the exact opposite of kana and its sisters because it gives nasab to the mubtada, to the ism, and rafa to the khabar. What are the sisters of inna? Inna wa anna wa lakinna wa ka'anna wa layta wa la'alla. So all these are the sisters of inna and they have the same effect. تقول إن زيدا قائم. So it gives the ism, the state of rafa, and the khabar, the state of rafa.
وَلَيْتَ عَمْرًا شَاخِصٌ.
When it was kana, it was kana amrun shakhisan. But now if one of the sisters of inna occurs, it becomes
وَلَيْتَ عَمْرًا شَاخِصٌ.
وَمَا أَشْبَهَ ذَلِكَ, and so on. وَمَعْنَى إِنَّ وَأَنَّ لِلتَّوْكِيد. Now he explains the meanings of the sisters of inna. Inna and anna are used for emphasis. وَلَكِنَّ لِإِسْتِدْرَاكِ. It is close to saying but in English. وَلَكِنِّي, but I. وَلَكِنِّي لَا أُرِيدُ أَنْ أَذْهَبْ. وَلَكِنِّي مَا ذَهَبْتُ. But I didn't go. So that is the meaning of لَكِنَّ. وَكَأَنَّ لِتَشْبِيهِ. وَكَأَنَّ is used to show resemblance. وَلَيْتَ لِتَمَنِّي. Layta is to show a wish. وَلَعَلَّ لِتَرَجِّي. And لَعَلَّ is used to show hope. وَتَوَقُّ, and expectation. So these are kana and its sisters and inna and its sisters. Now let's look at two more examples. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ شَاكِرًا عَلِيمًا. This is of course a verse from the Quran, or a part of a verse. So here we see this rule in action. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ شَاكِرًا عَلِيمًا. So the question is, why is there another word after the khabar of kana and why is it mansub? What is the answer? So all these particles, they can have more than one mubtada and it can have more than one khabar. So here we see a second khabar and it takes the same i'rab as the first one. So kana, Allah is the ism of kana, and shakiran is the first khabar of kana, and aliman is the second khabar of kana. Inna Allaha ghafurun rahim. So this sentence is similar but with inna. So the ism of inna takes nasab and the two khabars of inna take the state of rafa. And there is one more, and that is dhanantu and its sisters. وَأَمَّا ظَنَنْتُ وَأَخْوَاتُهَا فَإِنَّهَا تَنْصِبُ الْمُبْتَدَأَ وَالْخَبَرَ عَلَى أَنَّهُمَا مَفْعُولَانِ لَهَا. As from dhanantu and its sisters, they give the state of nasab to both the mubtada and the khabar. And that is because both the mubtada and the khabar become the objects, the maf'ul bihi of dhanantu and its sisters. How does this work? We'll see in the examples. Let's look at dhanantu and its sisters first. وَهِيَ ظَنَنْتُ وَحَسِبْتُ وَخِلْتُ وَزَعَمْتُ وَرَأَيْتُ وَعَلِمْتُ وَوَجَدْتُ وَاتَّخَذْتُ وَجَعَلْتُ وَسَمِعْتُ
An example is ظننت زيدا منطلقا. So here ظننت means I thought. زيدا, the first, the ism of ظننت, which is a maf'ul, which is an object of ظننت. منطلقا is the second object and it is also the khabar. So both of these take nasab. So here the sentence means I thought Zaid is going. وَخِلْتُ عَمْرًا شَاخِصًا, the same. خِلْتُ gives nasab to both the ism and the mubtada, the ism and the khabar. وَمَا أَشْبَهَ ذَلِكَ, and so on. So these are the three agents which are applied to the subject and the predicate, or the mubtada and the khabar. Let's look at some special cases for kana and the sisters, for inna and the sisters. Here what happens in the sentence is kana Muhammadun. Muhammad is the ism of kana, that much is clear. So what happens after the ism? يحب قراءة الكتب. In the place of one word as the khabar, we find an entire sentence. يحب قراءة الكتب. So here what happens is that the khabar is in compound form. It is in the form of a sentence. So this entire sentence is the khabar. So it is in the state of nasab as a sentence. But as for the words, they keep the same i'rab as they would when they occur in an independent sentence. So يحب is the fi'al mudari' and it is marfu'. And qira'ata is the maf'ul bihi and it is also mudaf, and kutubi is the mudaf ilayh. So they keep the i'rab as they would in an independent sentence. But as a whole, this entire sentence is the khabar and it is in the state of nasab. Sometimes the khabar can come before the mubtada. So as in this sentence, inna fi dhalika la ibra. So it is ibratan, la ibratan, because it is the khabar of, it is the ism of inna. But where is the khabar? Khabar comes before the ism in this sentence. So fi dhalika takes the position of the khabar. So it is supposed to be in the state of rafa, but because it is a shib jumla or a partial sentence, it keeps the normal harakat and the normal i'rab. But as a whole, it is in a state of rafa because it is the khabar of inna. وَكَانَ حَقًّا عَلَيْنَا نَصْرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. These are of course ayat in the Quran. So here haqqan, it is haqqan with the tanween. It comes before the mubtada. It is actually the khabar of kana, and that is why it is mansoob. Alayna, ala harf, and na is the dhamir muttasil. Nasrul mu'minin. Here why is it rafa, nasr? Because it is the ism of kana, which is actually coming after the khabar. So you don't need to be confused about this because there's an easy way to figure out which is the mubtada and which is the khabar. The mubtada is the subject about which you're talking, and the khabar is the information you are giving about this subject. So if you look at it that way, it's really easy to figure out. So inna fi dhalika la ibra. So we are talking about ibra here. And where is the ibra? Fi dhalik. So fi dhalik is the predicate and ibra is the subject. وَكَانَ حَقًّا عَلَيْنَا نَصْرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. What are we talking about? We are talking about nasr, help of the mu'mineen. And what about the help of the mu'mineen? It is a haqq upon myself, Allah says. It is a haqq on me. It is a right upon me. So that information, haqqan, is the predicate and nasr is the subject. So it is the mubtada or the ism of kana. Now we come to what is known as the tawabi', or the elements which follow the i'rab of the word they are linked to. And the first of the tawabi' is the na'at, or the adjective. It is fairly straightforward. النعت تابع للمنعوت في رفعه ونسبه وخفضه وتعريفه وتنكيره. So the rafa just follows the i'rab of the man'ut. Rafa is the adjective, so it is describing, na'at is the adjective, so it is describing something.
So what it describes is the man'ut. So whatever the state of the man'ut, the na'at follows it. So if it is rafa, nasab or khafdh, it follows it. It also follows it being ma'rifa or nakira, wa ta'rifihi wa tankirihi. Its definiteness or indefiniteness, which means that if the man'ut is a definite noun, the sifa, the na'at, is going to be definite as well. And if it is nakira, if it is indefinite, the na'at is also going to be indefinite. What Ibn Ajrum omitted here is it also follows the gender of the man'ut. So if the man'ut is feminine, the na'at will also be feminine. If it is masculine, it will also be masculine. It also follows the number of the man'ut. So if it is plural, then the na'at should also be plural. Let's look at some examples. وَرَأَيْتُ زَيْدًا الْعَاقِلَةِ. So al-aqila is the na'at. And why does it have an alif lam? Why is it definite? Because Zayd is a proper noun and therefore it is definite. So it just follows it. It is masculine. Zayd is in the state of nasab, so al-aqila. It is not aqilu, it is aqila because it follows the state or the i'rab of the man'ut, which is Zayd here. وَمَرَرْتُ بِزَيْدٍ الْعَاقِلِ. But if Zayd is in the state of khafdh, then the na'at will also be in the state of khafdh. وَالنَّكِرَةُ كُلُّ اسم شَاعٍ في جنسه لا يختص به واحد دون آخر. So now he's going to describe the nakira. Nakira is somewhat the default state of the noun. وَتَقْرِيبُهُ كُلُّ مَا صَلَحَ دُخُولُ الْأَلِفِ وَاللَّامِ عَلَيْهِ. So an easy way of finding the nakira is to see if the alif lam can be applied to that word. نحو الرجل والفرس. So take these words for example. The asl, the definite, the default state of this word is rajulun. Can we apply the alif lam to this word? Ar-rajulu is correct. So it can be done. So we know that rajulun without the alif lam is indefinite. Can we apply alif lam to faras? Yes, we can apply the alif lam. So farasun is indefinite. But we can't say al-Muhammad. So Muhammad by itself is definite because we can't apply the alif lam to make it definite because it is already definite. Now let's look at definite nouns. What are the kinds of definite nouns? So these are a few things. The first is of course al-ism al-mudmar, the personal pronouns like ana, anta, anti, huwa, hiya. We are talking about someone specific. So all these pronouns are definite. After that comes al-ism alladhi fihi al-alif wal-lam. Any word, any noun with an alif lam are going to be definite. Al-ism al-mubham aw al-mawsul, the demonstrative pronouns. Hada, hadihi, haula. Alladhi, alladhani, allati, allawati. All of these are definite because they're all talking about something specific. Al-ism al-alam, the proper nouns like Makkah, Zayd, Muhammad, all these are definite. All the names are definite. Ma udifa ila hadihi al-arba'. Anything that is attached as a mudaf to any of these four things, it becomes definite. For example, qalamu Zaydin. Qalamun by itself is indefinite. But if we attach it to Zayd, a proper noun, as a mudaf, then it becomes clear which pen we are talking about. So it is qalamu Zaydin, not just any pen. It is a pen of Zayd. If you say baytu Zaydin or masjidu Muhammadin, in all these examples, it becomes clear which masjid or which noun we are talking. You can also say baytu Muhammadin. So it becomes clear which house we are talking about. It is the house of Muhammad. so it becomes definite. You can say قلم هذا or قلم هذه or كتاب الرجل دفتر الغلام. And how do you attach words to the personal pronouns? It occurs as the ضمير المتصل. If you want to attach something to أنا, you can say قلمي. So the ya is the ضمير متصل. Because when it is attached, it comes in the form of the attached pronoun. Next we have the عطف or the conjunctions. حروف العطف 10. The particles of عطف are 10. وهي الواو والفاء وثم وأو وأم وإما وبل ولا ولكن وحتى في بعض المواضع. So all these are the particles of عطف. And حتى, the final particle, it's not always عطف, but in some cases it occurs as the عطف. Well, this will become clear when we look at some examples for this, inshallah. فإن عطفت بها على مرفوع رفعته أو على منصوب نصبته أو على مخفوض خفضته. So this is also one of the tawabi'. So the ataf just follows the i'rab of the ma'tuf or the noun or the verb that it is attached to. أو على منصوب جزمته. If it is jazm, it will also be in the state of jazm, because here we are talking about jazm because the ataf can be linked to verbs as well, not just nouns. So there are 4 different possible states of i'rab, because the noun, as we learned, does not take the state of jazm, but the verb takes the state of jazm. تقول قام زيد وعمر. So the waw is the ataf. So here it means and, waw. So Zaydun wa Amrun. We're simply saying Zayd and Amr. But Amr is the ataf on Zayd. So whatever the i'rab of Zayd, Amr is also going to be in that state. And we can have an unlimited number of ataf. So we can say قام زيد وعمر وخالد ومحمد. So in all these cases, they are just following the i'rab of whatever it is linked to. وَرَأَيْتُ زَيْدًا وَعَمْرًا. Here, Zaydan is mansub. So the ataf on it, which is Amr, is also mansub. وَمَرَرْتُ بِزَيْدٍ وَعَمْرٍ. If it is majroor or makhfudh, it is the same. The ataf follows the i'rab. وَزَيْدٌ لَمْ يَقُمْ وَلَمْ يَقْعُدْ. This is an example for the state of jazm. Now let's talk about an important ruling in the Quran, which is taken from this grammatical rule. Let me show you what I mean. So this is the ayah describing the wudu. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِذَا قُمْتُمْ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ. So Allah Azza wa Jal says, O you who believe, if you stand up for the prayer, then wash your face. فَاغْسِلُوا is the verb. And وُجُوهَكُمْ is the maf'ul bihi. So it is in the state of nasb. وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ. So أَيْدِيَكُمْ and your hands. Wash your face and your hands. So the i'rab of al-aydi is that it is the atf upon wujuhakum. So it follows the same grammatical state. So it is also mansub. Ilal marafiq. Your hands until your elbows. Wamsahu biru'usikum. And this is another verb in the imperative form. Biru'usikum. Here it is harf and jar. So it is ru'usikum and not ru'usakum. Wamsahu bi ru'usikum. Wa arjulakum. So in the normal flow, if it is following the normal flow of the ayah, should be وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ وَأَرْجُلِكُمْ if أَرْجُلِكُمْ was atf on رُؤُوسِكُمْ. But it is rather in the state of nasb, which shows that it is not atf on رُؤُوسِكُمْ but on something else. And actually it is an atf on أيديكم. So here this returns to the first part of the ayah. So how does this affect the meaning? From the ayah we understand Allah Azza wa Jal wants us to wash our faces and our hands till the elbows and then wipe our heads. وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ. And He does not want us to wipe over the feet, but rather wash it. How do we know Allah Azza wa Jal wants us to wash our feet and not just wipe over our feet? Because it is in the state of nasab. And as it is in nasab, let's look back to what it is linked to. It is linked to the word وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ. So it is also mansub. It is following the grammatical sentence, the grammatical state. So this is actually a maf'ul bihi of اغسلوا, wash. So the ayah is فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ. So all these return to اغسلوا. And only رؤوسكم returns to وَامْسَحُوا. So I hope that is clear. This is a great example of how important learning and understanding i'rab correctly can help you understand the ayah. The particle hatta, in the matan it said وَحَتَّى فِي بَعْضِ الْمَوَاضِعِ, in only some cases. Why is that? If it comes like this in the sentence أَكَلْتُ السَّمَكَةَ حَتَّى رَأْسَهَا, so here it is atf. I ate the fish and even its head. So رأسها is atf on السمكة. But if the sentence is حتى مطلع الفجر, here حتى is used as a particle like إلى, عن, في. So it is one of the particles of jar. That is why it is majroor or makhfud. حتى مطلع الفجر. Here it means until. Here حتى means even. And here it means until. حتى مطلع الفجر. Next we have the atf or the conjunctions. حروف العطف عشرة. The particles of atf are 10. وهي الواو والفاء وثم وأو وأم وإما وبل ولا ولكن وحتى في بعض المواضع. So all these are the particles of atf. And hatta, the final particle, it's not always atf, but in some cases it occurs as the atf. Well, this will become clear when we look at some examples for this, inshallah. فإن عطفت بها على مرفوع رفعته أو على منصوب نصبته أو على مخفوض خفضته. So this is also one of the tawabi'. So the ataf just follows the i'rab of the ma'tuf or the noun or the verb that it is attached to. أو على منصوب جزمته. If it is jazm, it will also be in the state of jazm, because here we are talking about jazm because the ataf can be linked to verbs as well, not just nouns. So there are 4 different possible states of i'rab, because the noun, as we learned, does not take the state of jazm, but the verb takes the state of jazm. تقول قام زيد وعمر. So the waw is the ataf. So here it means and, waw. So Zaydun wa Amrun. We're simply saying Zayd and Amr. But Amr is the ataf on Zayd. So whatever the i'rab of Zayd, Amr is also going to be in that state. And we can have an unlimited number of ataf. So we can say قام زيد وعمر وخالد ومحمد. So in all these cases, they are just following the i'rab of whatever it is linked to. وَرَأَيْتُ زَيْدًا وَعَمْرًا. Here
Zaydan is mansub. So the ataf on it, which is Amr, is also mansub. وَمَرَرْتُ بِزَيْدٍ وَعَمْرٍ. If it is majroor or makhfudh, it is the same. The ataf follows the i'rab. وَزَيْدٌ لَمْ يَكُمْ وَلَمْ يَقُدْ. This is an example for the state of jazm. Now let's talk about an important ruling in the Quran, which is taken from this grammatical rule. Let me show you what I mean. So this is the ayah describing the wudu. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا قمتم إلى الصلاة فاغسلوا وجوهكم وأيديكم إلى المرافق. So Allah Azza wa Jal says, O you who believe, if you stand up for the prayer, then wash your face. فاغسلوا is the verb. And وجوهكم is the maf'ul bihi. So it is in the state of nasab. وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ. So أَيْدِيَكُمْ and your hands. Wash your face and your hands. So the i'rab of al-aydi is that it is the atf upon wujuhakum. So it follows the same grammatical state. So it is also mansub. Ilal marafiq. Your hands until your elbows. Wamsahu biru'usikum. And this is another verb in the imperative form. Biru'usikum. Here it is harf and jar. So it is ru'usikum and not ru'usakum. Wamsahu biru'usikum. Wa arjulakum. So in the normal flow, if it is following the normal flow of the ayah, it should be wamsahu biru'usikum wa arjulikum. If arjulikum was atf on ru'usikum. But it is rather in the state of nasab, which shows that it is not atf on ru'usikum but on something else. And actually it is an atf on aydiyakum. So here this returns to the first part of the ayah. So how does this affect the meaning? From the ayah we understand Allah Azza wa Jal wants us to wash our faces and our hands till the elbows and then wipe our heads. وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ. And He does not want us to wipe over the feet, but rather wash it. How do we know Allah Azza wa Jal wants us to wash our feet and not just wipe over our feet? Because it is in the state of nasab. And as it is in nasab, let's look back to what it is linked to. It is linked to the word وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ. So it is also mansub. It is following the grammatical sentence, the grammatical state. So this is actually a maf'ul bihi of اغسلوا, wash. So the ayah is فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ. So all these return to اغسلوا. And only رؤوسكم returns to وَامْسَحُوا. So I hope that is clear. This is a great example of how important learning and understanding i'rab correctly can help you understand the ayah. The particle hatta, in the matan it said وَحَتَّى فِي بَعْضِ الْمَوَاضِعِ. In only some cases. Why is that? If it comes like this in the sentence أَكَلْتُ السَّمَكَةَ حَتَّى رَأْسَهَا. So here it is atf. I ate the fish and even its head. So رأسها is atf on السمكة. But if the sentence is حتى مطلع الفجر, here حتى is used as a particle like إلى, عن, في. So it is one of the particles of jar. That is why it is majroor or makhfud. حتى مطلع الفجر. Here it means until. Here حتى means even. And here it means until. حتى مطلع الفجر. Next we have باب التوكيد or corroboration. Now corroboration is used to emphasize something. التوكيد تابع للمؤكد في رفعه ونسبه وخفضه وتعريفه. Same like the other tawabi', the tawkid also follows whatever it is emphasizing or whatever it is linked to.
it follows the grammatical states, it follows the definiteness. وَيَكُونُ بِأَلْفَاظٍ مَعْلُومَةٍ. And there are specific phrases or specific words used for التوكيد or emphasis or corroboration. They are النفس والعين وكل وأجمع والتوابع أجمع وهي أقطع وأبتع وأسبع. So all these are particles of corroboration. Let's look at some examples. تقول قام زيد نفسه. Zaid stood up. So the role of the tawqid is to make things very clear and leave no room for doubt. So when you say قام زيد, it's clear that Zaid stood up. But you want to further emphasize that it is Zaid himself who is standing. So you say نفسه. So Zaid stood he himself. So that is the role of نفسه here, which is the tawqid. وَرَأَيْتُ الْقَوْمَ كُلَّهُمْ. And I saw the group of people. كُلَّهُمْ. I saw everyone. If you say رَأَيْتُ الْقَوْمَ, maybe there is a possibility that one or two people from this qawm, you have not seen them. But when you say وَرَأَيْتُ الْقَوْمَ كُلَّهُمْ, you're emphasizing that you saw absolutely everyone. وَمَرَرْتُ بِالْقَوْمِ أَجْمَعِينَ. I passed by the entire clan, the entire qawm. So أجمعين here is the tawqid for qawm. Now you have to notice that it follows the number. You have to say أجمعين because you can't say مررت بالقوم أجمعه. It also has to be plural because al-qawm is plural. Let's look at some examples from the Quran. لَأَمْلَأَنَّ جَهَنَّمَ مِنَ الْجِنَّةِ وَالنَّاسِ أَجْمَعِينَ. I will fill Jahannam with the jinn and people, أجمعين, all of them. فَسَجَدَ الْمَلَائِكَةُ كُلُّهُمْ أَجْمَعُونَ. So here there are two particles of corroboration. فَسَجَدَ الْمَلَائِكَةُ. The malaika made sujud. كُلُّهُمْ, all of them. أَجْمَعُونَ, all of them. There is no doubt. You're not leaving anyone out. So here something interesting is, there is a difference of opinion. Some people say that Iblis was one of the malaika. And it is refuted by this ayah actually. Because Allah says, فَسَجَدَ الْمَلَائِكَةُ كُلُّهُمْ أَجْمَعُونَ. All the malaika made sajda. And Iblis did not make the sajda because Iblis was one of the jinn.
باب البدل إذا أبدل اسم من اسم أو فعل من فعل تبعه في جميع إعرابه. So the badal is also one of the tawabi', so it follows the i'rab of whatever it is linked to. So if an ism or a noun is replaced or substituted, or a fi'l is substituted, it follows the i'rab of whatever it substitutes. وَهُوَ عَلَى أَرْبَعَةِ أَقْسَامٍ. And the badal is of 4 types. بدل الشيء من الشيء. First we have the complete substitution. This is بدل الشيء من الشيء. So here one thing substitutes another completely. That is the complete substitution. وبدل البعض من الكل. Then we have partial substitution. So we are only going to substitute a part of something. Then we have بدل الاستعمال, or the substitution of content, and we'll see what that is. وبدل الغلط, and finally we have the substitution by mistake. Now let's look at some examples for these. نحو قولك قام زيد أخوك. So when you say قام زيد, it means that Zaid stood up. Now we are going to bring another word which will change the meaning from Zaid to someone else. So when we say قام زيد, it means Zaid stood up. But now you're saying قام زيد أخوك. So you're changing the meaning from Zaid to your brother. So you're talking about Zayd, your brother specifically. So the meaning is now changed to your brother. So before, if you just said Qama Zaydun, it can mean any Zayd. But now the meaning is Zaydun akhuka, Zayd who is your brother. So here we have complete substitution. Now let's look at an example for partial substitution. وَأَكَلْتُ الرَّغِيفَ ثُلُثَهُ. I ate the loaf of bread. ثُلُثَهُ. 1/3 of it. So when you say أَكَلْتُ الرَّغِيفَ, it means that you ate the whole loaf of bread. But then when you say ثُلُثَهُ, you're substituting the meaning from the entire loaf to 1/3 of it. So this is an example for partial substitution. Now for the substitution of ishtimal, or the substitution of content. For example, you can say نفعني زيد علمه. Zayd benefited me. علمه, his knowledge. So first you're talking about Zayd. Zayd benefited me. Then you say his knowledge. It is his knowledge that you're talking about and not Zayd as a person. So here you are changing the content of the thing. So this is the substitution of content. And finally we have the substitution by mistake. And that is when you say, for example, رأيت زيدا الفرس. So you say, I saw Zayd by mistake, and then you correct yourself and then you say al-farasa. It was the faras that you saw, it is not Zayd. رأيت زيدا الفرس. رأيت زيدا السيارة. So you're checking yourself and you're correcting yourself and then you're saying another word. So this is the substitution of mistake. أردت أن تقول الفرس فغلطت فأبدلت زيدا منه. So you wanted to say al-faras, but you made a mistake and you said Zayd instead of it. So this is the substitution by mistake. Now some more examples. أكلت التفاح. I ate the apple. So now you're going to do partial substitution here. So you can say أكلت التفاح نصفه. If you say حفظت القرآن, it means you memorized the entire Quran. Then if you say ثلثه, it means you memorized only 1/3 of it. Now here we have some more examples for each type. Complete substitution. جاء زيد أخوك. بدل البعد من الكل. حفظت القرآن ثلثه. بدل الاشتمال. أعجبني زيد علمه. بدل الغلط. رأيت زيدا الفرس. So these are the examples for substitution. If you have any difficulty understanding it, if you need any further help, just reach out in the Facebook group and I'll be happy to help you out, inshallah.
Now, inshallah, we are going to move on to the nouns in the state of Nasb. Let's take a look at the nouns which are always in the state of Nasb. Ibn Ajrum says, Al-Mansubatu 15. The Mansubat are 15 types. وهي المفعول به والمصدر وظرف الزمان وظرف المكان والحال والتمييز والمستثنى واسم لا والمنادى والمفعول من أجله والمفعول معه وخبر كان وأخواتها واسم إن وأخواتها والتابع للمنسوب وهو أربعة أشياء: النعت والعطف والتوكيد والبدل. So these are the 15 types of nouns which are always in the state of Nasb. These are the direct object, the verbal noun, the adverbial of time and place, the circumstantial qualifier, the hal, the tamiz, which is the specifying element, then we have the exception, then we have the noun of la, the vocative, the causative object, the accompanying object, the predicate of kana and the sisters, the khabar of kana and the sisters, the noun of inna and the sisters, and the nouns that follow any of the mentioned mansubs.
these are the tawabi' like we had in the marfu'at. So the tawabi' we already gone through them. النعت والعطف والتوكيد والبدل. These follow whatever state the noun they are linked to is in. So if it is mansub, so these tawabi' will also be mansub in that case. Now inshallah, let's go through all these nouns one by one and try and understand what they are exactly. The first one is the maf'ul bihi, or the object. وهو الاسم المنسوب الذي يقع به الفعل نحو ضربت زيدا. It is the mansub noun upon which the action is done. So whenever we have a fi'l, we have a maf'ul bihi, or the thing to which the action is done. And this is the object. So when you say darabtu zaydan, daraba is the action. The ta of darabtu is the fa'il, which is referring to the first person. So darabtu means I hit. And now we need a subject. What did you hit? So the subject in this case is Zayd. And as it is the maf'ul bihi, it is given the state of nasab. So Zayd becomes Zaydan. وَرَكِبْتُ الْفَرَسَ. Al-faras here is the object. وَهُوَ قِسْمَانِ. And the maf'ul bihi is of two types. ظَاهِرٌ وَمُضْمَرٌ. And this is the same classification we have come across multiple times already. The ظاهر is the apparent, and the mudmar is the hidden or indirect in a way, and it takes place in the form of the dhamir. فَظَاهِرُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ ذِكْرُهُ. The apparent maf'ul bihi is as we saw in the previous examples, as in ضربت زيدا وركبت الفرس. All these are ظاهر or apparent. So what is mudmar? وَالْمُضْمَرُ قِسْمَانِ. The mudmar is also two types, متصل ومنفصل. The attached maf'ul bihi and the separate or the isolated maf'ul bihi. فَالْمُتصِّلُ إِثْنَا عَشَرٍ. The attached maf'ul bihi can occur in 12 forms. وهي ضربني وضربنا وضربك وضربك وضربكما وضربكم وضربكن وضربه وضربها وضربهما وضربهم وضربهن. So the maf'ul bihi occurs here in the form of an attached pronoun. So the end of these verbs is what we have as the maf'ul bihi. And when it happens in this form, it is the maf'ul bihi muttasil, mudmar and muttasil. And how can it happen as munfasil or separate? وَالْمُنْفَصِلُ إِثْنَا عَشَرٍ. The munfasil is also 12. وَهِيَ إِيَّايَ وَإِيَّانَ وَإِيَّاكَ وَإِيَّاكِ وَإِيَّاكُمَا وَإِيَّاكُمْ وَإِيَّاكُنَّ وَإِيَّاهُ وَإِيَّاهَا وَإِيَّاهُمَا وَإِيَّاهُمْ وَإِيَّاهُنْ. So this comes in the sentence as a standalone word, and it comes as the maf'ul bihi. A really good example of this is the ayah which all of us know, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. So the إِيَّاكَ here is the object. When you say إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ, na'budu, the verb means we worship. So what is the object? What do we worship? It is إِيَّاكَ, towards you, to translate it literally. But this word as a whole is the maf'ul bihi, and its state of i'rab is the state of nasb. So this is the object, and it is very straightforward, as you can see. So just remember that the object is always in the state of nasb, and it is the thing to which the fi'l or the action
is being done to. Next we have the masdar or the absolute object. المصدر هو الاسم المنسوب الذي يجيء ثالثا في تصريف الفعل. What does this mean? So when we list out the forms of a verb, usually we say ضرب يضرب ضربا. Any verb we want to talk about, we usually mention these three forms. فعل يفعل فعلا. So the third form is actually the masdar or the absolute object. So ضرب يضرب ضربا. ضربا is the masdar. فعل يفعل فعلا. فعلا is the masdar. وهو قسمان, and it is also two types, لفظي ومعنوي. So لفظي is literal and معنوي it is figurative. فإن وافق لفظه لفظ فعله فهو لفظي. So as we'll see in the examples, if the masdar and the fi'l use the same word, then it is lafzi or literal. نحو قتلته قتلا. So here the verb is the same, it is قتل. So it is masdar lafzi or a literal masdar. وإن وافق معنى فعله دون لفظه فهو معنوي. And if the masdar and the verb have the same meaning but a different word is used, it is still masdar, but here it is a figurative masdar. For example, if you say جلست قعودا, jalasa and qa'ada both mean sit. The meaning is the same, but the lafz or the word is different. So it is a ma'nawi masdar or a figurative masdar. وَقُمْتُ وُقُوفًا. Qama and waqafa are both stand. So the lafz or the word is different, but the meaning is the same. وَمَا أَشْبَهَ ذَلِكَ, and so on. So these are all examples for the masdar. ضرب يضرب ضربا. ضربت السارق ضربا مبرها. Usually the masdar is used to emphasize the meaning or strengthen the meaning. When you say ضربت السارق, I hit the thief. ضربا مبرها, a really strong, powerful beating. So I beat him with a strong beating. So the masdar further enhances or strengthens the verb. And if you look at examples in the Quran, we have the ayah وَاللَّهُ أَنْبَتَكُم مِّنَ الْأَرْضِ نَبَاتًا ثُمَّ يُعِيدُكُم فِيهِ وَيُخْرِجُكُم إِخْرَاجًا. The final word taking the state of nasb is the masdar, which further enhances the verb. And something we use a lot is the word shukran when you want to say thank you. Have you wondered why the word shukran is used with the tanween at the end? Why it's not shukru but shukran? Because it is short for saying ashkuruka shukran, where shukran is the masdar. So to say this in short, we use just the final word or the masdar shukran, but the meaning is actually ashkuruka shukran. The adverbials of time and place. باب ظرف الزمان وظرف المكان. ظرف الزمان هو اسم الزمان المنسوب بتقدير في، نحو اليوم والليلة وغدوة وبكرة وسحرا وغدا وعتمة وصباحا ومساء وأبدا وأمدا وحينا وما أشبه ذلك. So the adverbials of time and place, and we're going to talk about the adverbial of time or ظرف الزمان first. The ظرف الزمان is a noun which is always in the state of nasb, and it comes with the meaning of fi or in. So we're talking about something and expressing the time at which it occurred. So this is where the meaning of fi comes in. So and so happened in this time. So when the sentence comes in this form, this element, this noun which represents the time, is the adverbial of time. And all of these are examples. Al-yawma wal-laylata. Ra'aytu Zaydan al-yawma. I saw Zayd today. Akaltu al-khubza al-laylata. I ate the bread this night. Sa'araka bukratan, or sa'araka gadan. I will see you tomorrow. So all these words, their purpose is to show the time in which the action is going to occur or has already occurred. Now, the sentence which has the dharf al-zaman, it always answers the question of when. If it is answering the question of when, in this format, it is dharf al-zaman. What about the dharf al-makan? The adverbial of place, like the name states, it just shows you the place at which the action has occurred. وظرف المكان هو اسم المكان المنسوب بتقدير في. It is a noun which is mansub and it comes with the meaning of fi also. Or because it shows the place at which or the place in which the action is taking place. نحو أمام وخلف وقدام ووراء وفوق وتحت وعند ومع, and all these examples. So all these are showing you the place where the action is taking place. So if I say صليت وراء الإمام, I prayed behind the Imam. So the dharf makan always answers the question of where. The dharf zaman answers the question of when, and dharf makan answers the question of where. So let's look at some examples to understand the adverbials better. Sallamtu ala Muhammadin sabahan. So the sabahan, it is the mansub noun here, which is answering the question of when. I gave salam to Muhammad. When did I give salam to Muhammad? Sabahan, in the morning. And as it is the adverbial, that is why it is in the state of nasb. But what if I say instead, uhibbu sabah, I like the morning? This is not an adverbial of time because it does not occur with the meaning of fi. I'm not saying I like something in such and such a time, but I'm saying I like the morning. So this is not showing the time at which the action is occurring. So it is not a dharf zaman. Al-mu'minu yakhafu yawm al-qiyamah. Now this is a tricky sentence, so pay attention. The believer fears yawm al-qiyamah, the day of judgment. So is this a dharf or is it something else? Look at the next sentence as well. Al-kafiru yakhafu yawm al-qiyamah. So outwardly, both sentences look the same. But one of these sentences is a dharf and the other is not. How do we explain this? The mu'min fears the yawm al-qiyamah, the day of judgment itself. It is not talking about the time in which the mu'min fears. It is just telling us that he fears this time itself, yawm al-qiyamah. As for the kafir, yakhafu yawm al-qiyamah. He will be afraid on the day of judgment. This is coming with the meaning of fi. The taqdeer of this jumla is al-kafiru yakhafu fi yawm al-qiyamah. That is the meaning of the sentence. So even when the outward harakat look the same, based on the meaning of the sentence or the intention behind the sentence, this can be a dharf or this can be other than it. And I just want to add something that when the sentence comes with the particle or the harf, so this sentence, al-kafiru yakhafu fi yawm al-qiyamah, this is not a dharf because the element fi makes it jar and majroor.
Next we have the hal or the circumstantial qualifier. الحال هو الاسم المنسوب المفسر لما انبهم من الهيئات. The hal is the mansub noun which clarifies that which is unclear about the hayat or the circumstance surrounding the action or the verb. نحو قولك جاء زيد راكبا. So when you say جاء زيد, you have the verb جاء. It means Zayd came. Now it is a complete sentence. The meaning is clear that Zayd came. But the circumstance of the verb, the circumstance in which the action is taking place is not clear. So we want to clarify the circumstances surrounding this verb, and that is where the hal comes in. So we can say جاء زيد راكبا. Zayd came in the state of riding. So this is the mansub noun which acts as the hal or the circumstantial qualifier. وَرَكِبْتُ الْفَرَسَ مُسْرَجًا. I sat on the horse, or I rode the horse, musrajan, on the saddle or saddled up. وَلَقِيتُ عَبْدَ اللَّهِ رَاكِبًا. I met Abdullah in the state of riding. I met Abdullah when he was in the state of riding. If you say رَأَيْتُ مُحَمَّدًا مَاشِيًا, I saw Muhammad in the state of walking. وَمَا أَشْبَهَ ذَلِكَ, and whatever resembles that. So this is the hal. The hal clarifies the circumstances surrounding the action. ذهبت إلى البيت ماشيا. I went to the house walking. ولا يكون الحال إلا نكرة. Now there are some properties for the hal, some rules. The hal is always indefinite, and this is one way you can tell it apart from the sifa. The sifa, if the subject is ma'rifa, the sifa will also be ma'rifa. But the hal is always nakira. وَلَا يَكُونُ إِلَّا بَعْدَ تَمَامِ الْكَلَامِ. The hal always comes after a complete sentence. جاء زيد, it is a complete sentence. ركبت الفرس, we have a complete, clear sentence. So the hal comes after that. وَلَا يَكُونُ صَاحِبُهَا إِلَّا مَعْرِفَةً. The subject of the hal is always ma'rifa. It is always definite. So you can't have a nakira as the subject. So according to this rule, you can't say جاء رجل راكبا. And this is a point of difference of opinion. There are exceptions to this rule. There are different opinions, but we won't be bothered too much about all that. But generally, the rule is that the subject of the hal is always ma'rifa, and the hal itself, it is always nakira, indefinite. So let's look at some more examples. دخلت المسجد حافيا. I entered the masjid حافيا, without any shoes on, barefooted. شربت اللبن ساخنا. I drank the milk when it is hot. So these are examples of the hal, and in all these cases, you can see it further clarifies the circumstance of the verb or the action. Now let's talk about the specifying element or the tamyiz. التمييز هو الاسم المنسوب المفسر لما انبهم من الذوات. The hal clarifies the circumstance in which the action is done. As for the tamyiz, it clarifies the type of the action. نحو قولك تصبب زيد عرقا وتفقأ بكر شحما وطاب محمد نفسا واشتريت 20 غلاما وملكت 90 نعجة وزيد أكرم منك أبا وأجمل منك وجها. So in all of these sentences, we see the tamyiz being used, and the role of the tamyiz is to clarify the type of the action that is taking place. تصبب زيد. Now تصبب means to drip. So if you read just the first part of the sentence, what you understand is that Zayd is dripping. But how is he dripping? That is where the tamyiz is going to come in and tell us what exactly we are talking about. So when you say tasabbaba Zaydun araqan, the meaning becomes Zayd was dripping with sweat. So araqan or sweat is the tamyiz here. وَمَلَكْتُ تِسْعِينَ نَعْجَةً, I own 90. 90 of what? So if you want to clarify the type of the thing you're talking about, you use the tamyiz. Na'ja. Zaydun akramu minka aban. If you say just Zaydun akramu minka, it just means Zayd is more generous than you. But if you say Zaydun akramu minka aban, he is more generous than you in terms of his father or his lineage. Ajmalu minka wajhan, he is more beautiful or more handsome than you, wajhan, in his face. So in all of these sentences, we are clarifying the type of the action or the type of the thing that we are talking about. وَلَا يَكُونُ إِلَّا نَكِرَةً, it is always indefinite. The tamyiz is always indefinite. وَلَا يَكُونُ إِلَّا بَعْدَ تَمَامِ الْكَلَامِ, it always comes after a complete sentence, a complete meaningful sentence, just like the hal. Now let's look at exceptions or the istithna. وحروف الاستثناء ثمانية. The particles of exception are 8. وهي إلا وغير وسوى وسوى وسواء وخلا وعدا وحاشا. So these are the particles which are used for showing exception. فالمستثنى بإلا ينصب إذا كان الكلام تاما موجبا. So now we are going to talk about the most common form of exception, and that is the particle إلا. فالمستثنى بإلا ينصب إذا كان الكلام تاما موجبا. The exception with إلا, it takes the word after إلا, it takes the state of nasb if it comes after a complete sentence. نحو قام القوم إلا زيدا. So the first part of the sentence قام القوم, it is a complete sentence. So when we add إلا, زيدا, زيدا takes the state of nasb. وخرج الناس إلا عمرا, the people went out except for عمر. وإن كان الكلام منفيا تاما جاز فيه البدل والنصب على الاستثناء. If the speech is negative or it begins with the particle of negation, then there are two possibilities in it. You can either use the word after the particle of exception as a badal, and it takes the ruling of the badal and the i'rab of the badal in the sentence, or it can be used in the state of nasb, just like the first instance. نحو ما قام القوم إلا زيد. So when this particle of negation comes, then the ruling is different. So in this sentence, we can either say ما قام القوم إلا زيد. Why is it rafa'? Because it is taking the ruling of badal. So badal on qawm. So qawm is in the state of rafa. So zaydun is also in the state of rafa. Or you can say ما قام القوم إلا زيدا, as in the first instance, because Zayd is the noun of exception or the noun of إلا. وإن كان الكلام ناقصا كان على حسب العوامل. If the speech is incomplete, then it depends on the sentence. نحو ما قام إلا زيد. So this is an incomplete sentence. ما قام, it is not a complete sentence. إلا زيد. So we'll explain this. Whatever would come here without إلا, if إلا was not in the sentence, what is the i'rab we would give for Zayd? That is the same i'rab we are going to give with إلا. So إلا has no effect on the i'rab of Zayd. ما قام, we can say ما قام زيد. So we say ما قام إلا زيد without any change in the i'rab. ما ضربت إلا زيدا, because Zayd here is the maf'ul bihi. you would say ما ضربت زيدا. And in the same way you say ما ضربت إلا زيدا. إلا has no effect. وما مررت إلا بزيد in the genitive. So what is the main difference in this sentence compared to the first one? This is an incomplete sentence. ما مررت. It is not a complete sentence. So this table further clarifies all these rules. The first is when we have a complete sentence which has no particle of negation. قام القوم إلا زيدا. It is always in the state of nasb, the noun of إلا. ما قام القوم إلا زيدا. In this case, with the negation, there are two options. It can be either positive, it can be either accusative in the state of nasb, as it is an exception, or it can be treated as badal, and it takes the i'rab of the noun it is attached to. ما قام القوم إلا زيد. ما قام إلا زيد. If the sentence is incomplete, إلا has no effect. It will take its normal i'rab in the sentence. ما قام إلا زيد. ما رأيت إلا زيدا. As a badal, if you look at this sentence, ما مررت بأحد إلا زيد. It is a badal, but why is it majroor? Because the element upon which the badal is made is in the state of jar or khafdh. Now let's apply these rules to the ayat in the Quran. In one place Allah Azza wa Jal says ما فعلوه إلا قليل منهم. Here قليل is in the state of rafa because it is a badal upon the ha. The ha here, which is a subject, and it is in the state of rafa. So qalilun is also in the state of rafa. The second example, Allah says فَشَرِبُوا مِنْهُ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا مِنْهُمْ. Qalilan because it is treated as the noun of illa. So it is in the state of nasb. ما أكلت إلا خبزا. ما مررت إلا بزيد. ما رأيت إلا زيدا. The last two examples, the sentence is incomplete. Next we have the other particles of exception like غير, siwa, suwa, sawa. All of these, the word after it is always in the state of majroor. والمستثنى بغير وسوى وسوى وسواء مجرور لا غير. والمستثنى بخلا وعدا وحاشا يجوز نسبه وجره. As for these particles, khala, ada, and hasha, it can either be in the state of nasab or it can be in the state of jar. So how does this work? Nahwa قام القوم خلا زيدا. Or you can say قام القوم خلا زيد. Both are allowed in these cases. عدا عمرا أو عمر. حاشا بكرا أو بكر. So these are the rules of the exception. Babu la, or absolute negation. First of all, what do we mean by absolute negation? We are not talking about the regular negation, but about negating the entire kind of something. For example, la rajula fid dar. There are no men in the house. So you are negating men as a whole. So this is absolute negation. There are some rules associated with this kind of negation. Let's see what they are. اعلم أن لا تنصب النكرات بغير تنوين إذا باشرت النكرة. The la gives the state of nasab to the nakira, to the indefinite noun, without the tanween, just like inna does. But there are a few conditions for this. إذا باشرت النكرة. If the la comes directly in front of the indefinite noun. ولم تتكرر, and it is not repeated. لا رجل في الدار. So the la gives the state of nasab to the noun rajul because it is a nakira. So this sentence means there are no men in the house, not even a single one. But if it is ma'rifah, then this rule cannot be applied. If it was Muhammad, you can't say La Muhammada fid dar. That is not a correct sentence because Muhammad is ma'rifah. It is definite and not indefinite. فَإِن لَمْ تُبَاشِرْهَا.
But if the la does not come directly in front of the noun, let's see what happens. فإن لم تباشرها وجب الرفع ووجب التكرار. If the la is not directly in front of the noun, then you have to give the state of rafa. And Ibn Ajrum says you have to repeat the la, as in the sentence لا في الدار رجل ولا امرأة. Here the fi comes between la and the noun, so it cannot be given the state of nasb, and it has to be repeated according to Ibn Ajrum. So you can't say la fi dari rajulun. That is not correct according to Ibn Ajrum. You have to add something. La fi dari rajulun wala imra'a. There is no man in the house nor any woman. But this is only one of the two opinions. The other scholars say that it is okay to use la without repetition, but it is preferred to have the repetition of the la. So if you say la fi dari rajulun, it is a correct sentence. فَإِن تَكَرَّرَتْ لَا. If the la is repeated and it comes directly before the noun, what happens? جَازَ إِعْمَالُهَا وَإِلْغَاؤُهَا. Then there are two options. You can apply the rule of absolute negation and give it the state of nasb, or you can also give it rafa. فَإِن شِئْتَ قُلْتَ لَا رَجُلَ فِي الدَّارِ وَلَا امْرَأَةٍ. You can say لَا رَجُلَ فِي الدَّارِ وَلَا امْرَأَةٍ, or you can say لَا رَجُلٌ فِي الدَّارِ وَلَا امْرَأَةٍ. Both are correct, and this is when the la is repeated but it comes directly before the noun. So these are the three instances of using the la of absolute negation. The vocative or the munada. Al-munada khamsatu anwa. The munada is used to call someone in Arabic. It is the particle ya, which we use when we want to address someone. Al-munada khamsatu anwa. The munada is of 5 types in Arabic. Al-mufradu al-alam, the singular proper noun. Wal-nakiratu al-maqsuda, an indefinite noun which is intended. Wal-nakiratu غير مقصودة, indefinite noun which is not intended. Wal-mudaf, the idafa construction. Wa-shabihu bil-mudaf, that which is similar to the mudaf. So let's explain all of these things. فأما المفرد العلم والنكرة المقصودة فيبنيان على الضم من غير تنوين. For these two, the proper noun and the indefinite noun which is intended, they take the dhamma without the tanween. نحو يا زيد ويا رجل. والثلاثة الباقية منصوبة لا غير. As for the remaining 3, these are always in the state of nasb. So that is why it is mentioned under the mansubat. The proper noun is when you use ya before a proper noun, like the name states, like ya Muhammad, ya Rajul, ya Walad. All of these take the state of rafa without the tanween. It is ya Muhammadu, ya Rajulu, ya Zaidu, ya Waladu. That is very straightforward. Then we have the nakira al-maqsuda. If it is an indefinite noun which comes after the ya, there are 2 possibilities. One is that you intend the thing you're calling specifically. For example, if you say ya talib, and you intend that specific student, so you have to say ya talibu. It takes the state of rafa without the tanween, ya talibu. But the same thing you can say, but here you don't mean this particular student in front of you, but you mean students in general. So if you use it with that meaning, it becomes the nakira غير مقصودة. So you say ya taliban, it takes the state of nasb. So what is the difference between ya talibu and ya taliban? Ya talibu is when you're talking about the student in front of you, specifically ya talib, or student. But if you want to use student in general, ya taliban. For example, you want to say ya taliban ijtahid, or student work hard. and you're addressing all students and not one in particular. That is the nakira al-maqsuda and ghair maqsuda. And the other two are the idafa and what is similar to the idafa. The idafa construction. So if you're saying, for example, Ya hafidh al-Quran, there are two words because it is the idafa. And so the vocative takes the fatha, the first word of the construction. It takes the state of nasb without tanween. Ya ashab al-qarya. What is an example for that which is that which resembles the idafa? Ya hafidhan al-Qur'ana. Ya hafidhan al-Qur'ana. This is a different structure which has a similar meaning. Or you say Ya rahiman bil ibadi. Here it is not an idafa construction, but it takes a similar meaning. You can say, for example, Ya jamilan khattuhu. All these are examples for the shabih bil mudaf. So these are the cases of the vocative. The causative object or the maf'ul min ajlihi وهو الاسم المنصوب الذي يذكر بيانا لسبب وقوع الفعل. It is the mansub noun which is used to clarify the cause of the action. That is the causative object. It clarifies the cause for the fi'l or the action. قام زيد إجلالا لعمر. Zaid stood up out of respect for Amr. Zaid stood up out of respect for Amr. So why did Zaid stand up? Out of respect. So this clarifying noun, it is the causative object. وَقَصَدْتُكَ ابْتِغَاءَ مَعْرُوفِكَ. I came to you wanting your goodwill. So the maf'ul min ajlihi clarifies the reason. وَالَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ رِئَاءَ النَّاسِ. An ayah of the Quran. Those who spend their wealth to show off to the people. So the causative object always answers the question of why. Why did these people spend their wealth? It is to show off. وَالَّذِينَ صَبَرُوا ابْتِغَاءَ وَجْهِ اللَّهِ وَجْهِ رَبِّهِمْ. Those who had patience, wanting the, literally it means the face of Allah Azza wa Jal. وَلَا تُمْسِكُوهُنَّ ضِرَارًا. Do not hold on to them in order to harm them. قَدِمَ الْمُسْلِمُونَ لِلْمَدِينَةِ زِيَارَةً لِلْمَسْجِدِ. So all these are examples of the causative object. The maf'ul ma'ahu or the accompanying object. وهو الاسم المنسوب الذي يذكر لبيان من فعل معه الفعل. It is the mansub noun which clarifies something that is done along with the action. نحو قولك جاء الأمير والجيش. Now in the maf'ul ma'ahu, the meaning of this verb, it takes the meaning of ma'a or with. So this sentence actually means جاء الأمير مع الجيش. The Amir came with the army. So the jaysh is accompanying the Amir or the action of جاء al-Amir. The jaysh is accompanying it. The jaysh came along with the Amir. This is what the maf'ul ma'ahu means. استوى الماء والخشبة. The water and the pieces of wood, they came in level with each other. So it means استوى الماء مع الخشبة. So this is the accompanying object. Let's look at some more examples. فأجمعوا أمركم وشركاءكم والذين تبوأوا الدار والإيمان سافر الخليل والليلة مانك وسعيدا. In all these sentences, the waw takes the meaning of ma'a. Khalil traveled along with the night. What is your problem? Malak wa sa'idan. Ma'a sa'id, with sa'id. So this is the maf'ul ma'ahu. The final part of the Ajrumiyyah is the nouns in the state of Khafdh. Al-makhfudhatu thalathatu anwa'. The makhfudhat are three types. Makhfudun bil-harfi wa makhfudun bil-idafa wa tabi'un lil-makhfudh. There are three situations in which the noun takes the state of khafdh. One is with the harf, if there is a particle before it. Then there is idafa. When it is the idafa construction, the mudaf ilayhi takes the state of khafdh. And finally, we have the tabi'. The tawabi', they follow the i'rab of the noun they are linked to, and if it is in khafdh, it will also be in khafdh. فأما المخفوض بالحرف فهو ما يخفض ب من وإلى وعن وعلى وفي ورب والباء والكاف واللام وبحروف القسم وهي الواو والباء والتاء وبواو ربة وبمذ ومنذ. So all these particles, if they come before the word, then it will give it the state of khafdh. وأما ما يخفض بالإضافة فنحو قولك غلام زيد. The إضافة construction. زيد is the مضاف إليه and therefore it takes خفض. وهو على قسمين ما يقدر باللام وما يقدر بمن. It is two types. One which has the meaning of lam and one which takes the meaning of min. فالذي يقدر باللام, what is the one that is that takes the meaning of lam? نحو غلام زيد. It means غلام لزيد. Lam means of. It shows the possession. غلام زيد. والذي يقدر بمن نحو ثوب حز. Min takes the meaning of from approximately. ثوب حز, a garment of silk. وباب ساج, a door from wood or of wood, made of wood. وخاتم حديد, a ring made of iron. So these are the two ways the idafa construction works. It either takes a meaning of li, which shows possession, or it takes a meaning of min, which shows the thing from which it is taken. أخذت الكتاب من زيد ما رأيته مذ أمس رأيت غلام زيد الحمد لله رب العالمين. So these are all examples for the elements in the state of khafdh.